A single mom found a mysterious abandoned boat on a quiet beach. But when her loyal dog scratched inside, what he discovered shattered her heart. At first, it looked like nothing more than a rotting, mossy shell. But hidden deep in the wood was a box of secrets, letters from a soldier long thought dead, and a photograph that looked far too familiar. That's when a stranger appeared, claiming the boat once belonged to his missing father. Suddenly, what seemed like a simple discovery turned into a haunting mystery that tied two families together in ways no one expected. Buried beneath decades of silence are truths of war, love, and betrayal, but also a legacy waiting to be uncovered. Was this boat really abandoned, or was it left behind to tell a story that could finally heal a broken family? And when the final secret is unearthed, will it bring peace, or tear everything apart? Let me know in the comments which city or country you're listening from. If you like stories that connect us, don't forget to subscribe before you leave. The early morning mist rolled in thick waves across the shoreline, turning the world into a canvas of soft grays and muted blues. Emily Carson pulled her worn denim jacket tighter around her shoulders as she walked along the beach, her faithful German shepherd, Ranger, trotting beside her. The cool sand shifted beneath her feet with each step, and the distant cry of seagulls pierced the morning quiet. Her mind wasn't on the peaceful scene around her, though. Instead, it kept circling back to the pile of bills waiting on her kitchen counter. The red final notice stamp on her electric bill seemed to flash behind her eyes every time she blinked. And now the school was asking for money for Michael's field trip next month. Emily sighed, her breath visible in the chilly air. Being a single mom had never been easy, but lately, it felt like she was barely keeping her head above water. At least we still have our morning walks. Right, boy? She said, reaching down to scratch behind Ranger's ears. The dog leaned into her touch, his warm presence a steady comfort. Suddenly, Ranger's head snapped up, his ears perked forward, and before Emily could tighten her grip on his leash, he bolted ahead, barking with an urgency she'd never heard before. "Ranger, wait!" Emily called out, breaking into a run after him. The mist swirled around her legs as she followed her dog's dark shape through the gray morning light. Her feet slipped in the loose sand as she climbed one of the larger dunes, following Ranger's excited barks. When she crested the dune, Emily stopped dead in her tracks. There, nestled in a hollow between two sand dunes and partially buried in the shifting earth, sat an old fishing boat. Emily blinked hard, but the impossible sight remained. "What in the world?" she whispered. The vessel was at least 30 feet long, its wooden hull weather-beaten and gray with age. Thick ropes of seaweed still clung to its sides, despite the fact that the boat sat impossibly far from the waterline. No storm she could remember had been strong enough to carry something this size so far inland. Ranger circled the mysterious vessel, his nose working overtime as he sniffed every inch he could reach. The boat's once blue paint was barely visible beneath a thick coating of moss and salt residue. Rusted metal fittings dotted the hull like old scars, telling silent stories of years exposed to the elements. Emily approached cautiously, her practical mind trying to make sense of what she was seeing. "Careful, Ranger," she called out, but her dog was already scratching enthusiastically at the warped planks of the deck, whining with determination. The sound of his claws against wood echoed oddly hollow. Emily's curiosity got the better of her caution, and she moved closer to investigate. Kneeling beside Ranger, she brushed away some of the sand that had accumulated on the deck. Her fingers found a seam in the wooden planks that didn't quite match the others. It was wider, rougher, as if it had been pried apart before and poorly sealed again. Ranger's whining grew more insistent. Emily ran her hands along the seam, feeling splinters catch against her skin. There was definitely something different about this section of the deck. Looking closer, she could see where the wood had rotted slightly around the edges of the gap, creating a dark space underneath. Her heart began to beat faster as she worked her fingers into the seam. The old wood creaked in protest as she pulled, releasing a musty smell of salt and age. As the planks shifted, something solid bumped against her fingers. Emily reached deeper into the space, her hand closing around a small, solid object wrapped in what felt like fabric. With trembling fingers, she pulled it free, a tin box, no bigger than a paperback book, carefully wrapped in oilcloth that had somehow protected it from the worst of the elements. Sand-encrusted salt fell away as she wiped the surface with her sleeve. The metal underneath was tarnished but intact, its secrets still sealed inside. Emily looked at Ranger, who sat watching her with his head tilted, tail sweeping slowly across the sand. "What on earth did you just find for us?" she whispered, holding the mysterious box close to her chest as the morning mist continued to swirl around them. The weight of the tin box in her hands felt significant, like it carried more than just its physical mass. The sound of waves crashing against the distant shore seemed to fade away, leaving Emily alone with her discovery and the steady presence of her faithful companion in the gray morning light. Emily's legs trembled slightly as she made her way to a massive piece of driftwood bleached white by countless days in the Sunday. She sat down carefully, still holding the mysterious tin box close to her chest. Ranger settled at her feet, his warm body pressing against her ankles as if offering silent support. The morning fog was lifting now, and the rising sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of gold and pink. Seabirds called overhead, their cries carried on the salt-laden breeze. Emily took a deep breath, steadying her nerves as she placed the box in her lap. Her fingers worked carefully at the oilcloth wrapping, unwinding it slowly to protect the delicate material that had preserved the box's contents for so long. The tin itself was plain and unadorned, though time had left its mark in spots of corrosion and scratches across its surface. The lid was stuck fast, and Emily had to work her fingernails around the edges, gently prying until it finally came loose with a soft pop. The smell of old paper and forgotten memories drifted up from the open box. Inside, she found a stack of letters, their paper yellowed with age, edges softened and worn from being handled many times. The envelopes were addressed in a neat, masculine hand, though the ink had faded to a warm brown. Emily lifted out the first letter with trembling fingers, but something else caught her eye: several black and white photographs nestled beneath the correspondence. She carefully extracted them, holding them up to catch the morning light. The first photo showed a young soldier in uniform, his stance proud but his smile gentle. He stood before what looked like a military base, trees visible in the background. The next showed the same man, this time caught in a candid moment, laughing at something outside the frame. His face was handsome, with kind eyes that seemed to look right through time itself. But it was the third photograph that made Emily's breath catch in her throat. A young woman stood holding a baby, her face bright with joy despite the photo's faded quality. Emily's hand flew to her own face, fingers tracing the small scar above her eyebrow, an exact match to the mark she could see on the woman in the photograph. The woman's eyes, even in black and white, showed the same distinctive shape as Emily's own, a genetic blueprint carried through time. Ranger whined softly, picking up on her sudden tension. Emily patted his head absently, her other hand shaking as she turned her attention to the letters. The dates at the top of each page read 1953, the ink barely legible after all these years. Most of the letters appeared to have been sent, their envelopes showing postmarks and delivery stamps. But one envelope remained unsealed, the letter inside never reaching its intended recipient. Emily carefully unfolded it, her heart pounding as she began to read the faded words. "My dearest Margaret, if you find this, tell my daughter I never stopped looking for her. Every port, every town, every lead I could follow, I searched them all. The pain of losing both of you that day has never lessened. I know in my heart she's out there somewhere, and I pray she has your eyes, your spirit, your gentle soul. I'm leaving this here because I can't bear to carry this weight anymore. Maybe someday, by some miracle, these words will find their way to where they need to go. To my daughter, you were loved. You are loved. I'm sorry I couldn't find you." Forever searching, James. Emily's vision blurred with tears as questions churned through her mind. The soldier in the photographs, was this James? Could he be connected to her somehow? The woman's familiar features haunted her, like looking at her own reflection through the lens of time. And that scar, such a specific mark to share by mere coincidence. The boat itself suddenly seemed more significant than ever. Why had these precious memories been hidden away in its weathered hull? How long had they waited there, holding their secrets? The registration numbers and name on the vessel's bow might hold answers, if she could only make them out beneath years of salt and grime. Ranger stood up suddenly, shaking off sand and giving a soft woof that brought Emily back to the present moment. The sun had risen, higher, and she realized how long she'd been sitting there, lost in the mystery she'd uncovered. With careful, almost reverent movements, Emily returned the letters and photographs to the tin box. Her hands moved protectively over the container as she secured its lid, wrapping it once again in the oilcloth that had preserved it for so long. Whatever this box held, answers, history, family, she knew she had to understand its full story. Standing up from the driftwood log, Emily tucked the box securely under her arm. Ranger fell into step beside her as she turned toward home, his steady presence grounding her even as her mind raced with possibilities. The boat's markings were her first solid lead. She would start there, searching through old registration records until she found a match. The morning breeze carried the scent of salt and possibility as Emily and Ranger made their way along the beach, leaving the mysterious boat behind but carrying its secrets with them. Each step took her closer to home, and to the beginning of what she knew would be an important journey, uncovering the truth behind the hidden tin box and the people whose story it contained. The afternoon sunlight streamed through Emily's kitchen window, casting warm patches across her worn wooden table. She carefully arranged the contents of the tin box, treating each item as if it might crumble at her touch. The letters formed neat rows, their yellowed edges curling slightly, while the black and white photographs lay scattered between them like pieces of a puzzle waiting to be solved. 10-year-old Michael pressed against her side, standing on his tiptoes to get a better look. His breath fogged the glossy surface of the nearest photograph, the one showing the young soldier in his crisp uniform. "Mom, who is he?" Michael asked, pointing at the soldier's face. "He looks kind of sad, even though he's smiling." Emily's heart squeezed in her chest. There was something about the soldier's eyes that seemed to hold a story bigger than the moment captured in the photograph. "I'm not sure, honey, but you're right, he does look a little sad." Ranger lay under the table, his nose twitching as he stared intently at the box. Every few minutes, he would inch closer, sniffing at the edge of the table before settling back down with a heavy sigh. "Ranger really likes that box," Michael observed, reaching down to scratch behind the dog's ears. "He keeps smelling it over and over." Emily nodded, turning one of the photographs over in her hands. In the corner, barely visible against the aged paper, she noticed faint markings. Squinting, she could make out the initials J.H. carved delicately into the surface, followed by a single word, Korea. "Look at this, Michael," she said, pointing to the markings. "Someone wrote on the back of this picture. These might be the soldier's initials." Michael leaned in closer, his finger tracing the carved letters. "J.H., he read slowly. "In Korea, isn't that where they had that big war a long time ago?" "Yes, the Korean War," Emily replied, her mind already racing with possibilities. She pulled her laptop closer, typing quickly as Michael watched with curiosity. If this soldier was from around here, maybe there are some local records. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, searching through various historical databases and local newspaper archives. After several minutes, she found herself staring at a yellowed newspaper article from 1953. The headline made her catch her breath: "Local soldier James Holloway missing in action in Korea." The article included a grainy photograph that matched the one on her table perfectly. The same uniform, the same sad smile. According to the article, James Holloway had disappeared during a mission, leaving behind a young wife and an unborn child. Ranger suddenly lifted his head, ears perking up. A moment later, 3 sharp knocks echoed through the house, making Emily jump. She glanced at the clock, 3:30 in the afternoon, and she wasn't expecting any visitors. "Stay here with Ranger," she told Michael, rising from her chair. Through the front window, she could see a man standing on her porch, his posture straight despite his apparent age. A German shepherd, graying around the muzzle, stood alertly at his side. Emily opened the door, feeling Ranger press against her legs, as he ignored her earlier command to stay put. The man on her porch wore a worn leather jacket that had seen better days, his face weathered but his eyes sharp and clear. "Can I help you?" Emily asked, one hand automatically reaching down to rest on Ranger's head. The man's gaze shifted past her, fixing on something inside the house. Emily turned to follow his line of sight and realized he was staring at the tin box and its scattered contents on her kitchen table. "Name's Jack Holloway," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "And I believe you found something that belongs to my family." Emily's hand tightened reflexively in Ranger's fur as she processed the man's words. Holloway, the same name as the missing soldier from the article. The same initials carved into the photograph. She stood frozen in her doorway as all the pieces began falling into place, while Jack Holloway's eyes remained locked on the tin box that had started it all. The older German shepherd at Jack's side whined softly, nose twitching as it caught Ranger's scent. The two dogs regarded each other with curious intensity, mirroring the charged moment between their human counterparts. Michael appeared behind Emily, his small hand slipping into hers as he peeked around her at their unexpected visitor. "Mom?" he whispered, questions evident in his voice as he looked between Jack and the scattered items on their kitchen table. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she filled the coffee pot with water. Through the kitchen window, she could see the last rays of sunlight, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples. Behind her, the scrape of a kitchen chair against the floor made her jump. Jack Holloway sat rigidly at her table, his weathered hands clasped tightly together. His German shepherd, Shadow, lay at his feet, dark eyes fixed watchfully on Ranger, who paced restlessly near Emily's son Michael. "Sugar?" Emily asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Or cream?" Black, Jack replied curtly, his gaze never leaving the scattered contents of the tin box. Michael had retreated to the living room with his homework, but Emily could feel his curious eyes peeking around the corner every few minutes. Ranger finally settled down on the kitchen floor, though his ears remained alert, tracking every movement Shadow made. The coffee maker sputtered and hissed, filling the tense silence. Emily placed a steaming mug in front of Jack, then sat down across from him, wrapping her hands around her own cup for warmth. "The boat," Jack said suddenly, his voice rough. "Where exactly did you find it?" "In the dunes, past Miller's Point," Emily replied. It seemed strange, being so far from the water line. Jack's jaw tightened. "That boat belonged to my father, James Holloway." He reached for one of the photographs, his fingers trembling slightly as they traced the edges. "He used to take me fishing in it when I was small. Before." His voice trailed off, and Emily found herself leaning forward. "Before what?" "Before he disappeared." Jack's eyes hardened. 1953. They said he went missing in action in Korea, but that boat. He shook his head. "That boat tells a different story." Emily carefully pushed the stack of letters toward him. "These were in the box. They're dated around that time." Jack stared at the yellowed envelopes as if they might bite him. Shadow sensed his master's tension and lifted his head, a low whine escaping him. After a long moment, Jack picked up the top letter, unfolding it with deliberate care. "My dearest Mary," he read, his voice suddenly unsteady. "The nights here are endless, and I find myself watching the stars, knowing you're seeing the same ones back home. Our baby will be born soon, and I promise you, I'll find a way back." He stopped, swallowing hard. Emily watched as his hands began to shake more visibly. "These are his words," Jack whispered. "My father's words. I never." He cleared his throat roughly. "I never knew he wrote these." "There are more," Emily said gently. "Maybe they could help explain what happened to him?" Jack's expression darkened suddenly. "That boat is a curse," he spat, pushing the letters away. "It destroyed my family. My mother waited years for him to come home, but he never did. She wasted away watching that shoreline, and for what?" He stood abruptly, his chair scraping backward. "Some hidden letters and more questions we can't answer?" Shadow was on his feet instantly, pressing against Jack's leg. Ranger raised his head, a low growl rumbling in his chest, until Emily shushed him. "Please," Emily said, standing too. "If you just look at the rest of the letters, maybe together we could figure out." "No." Jack's voice cracked like a whip. "Leave it alone. Leave the past where it belongs." He turned toward the door, Shadow following closely. "Don't dig any deeper, Mrs. Carson. Some truths are better left buried." Emily hurried after him as he strode through her front door. "But don't you want to know what really happened?" Jack paused on her porch, his silhouette stark against the darkening sky. "What I want," he said quietly, "is to forget that boat ever existed." Without another word, he descended the steps and disappeared into the gathering darkness, Shadow a silent shadow at his heels. Emily stood in her doorway, the tin box clutched tightly against her chest. The evening air had grown cool, carrying the salt smell of the ocean. She watched until Jack's figure completely vanished into the night, then whispered, "Into the darkness, but I have to." Inside, Ranger padded to her side, pressing his warm body against her leg. Michael appeared in the hallway, his young face full of questions she wasn't sure how to answer. The letters in the box seemed to weigh heavier now, filled with secrets that refused to stay buried in the sand. The morning sun cast long shadows across Emily's dashboard as she pulled away from Michael's school. Her son's words still echoed in her mind. "Maybe the soldier in the pictures is trying to tell us something, Mom." Out of the mouths of babes, she thought, glancing at the tin box riding shotgun beside her. The county archives building looked more like an old church than a library, with its red brick walls and white wooden trim. Emily parked her car and gathered the box, taking a deep breath before heading inside. The heavy doors creaked as she entered, and the familiar smell of old books and paper wrapped around her. "Can I help you?" A woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes looked up from behind the main desk. Her name tag read Mrs. Henderson. "I hope so," Emily said, approaching the desk. "I'm researching someone who lived here in the 1950s, a Korean War veteran named James Holloway, Mrs. Henderson's eyes lit up. "Local history, that's my favorite." She patted the chair next to her computer. "Come, sit. Let's see what we can dig up." Emily settled in, carefully placing the tin box on the desk. As Mrs. Henderson's fingers flew across the keyboard. Emily explained about finding the boat and the letters. James Holloway, Mrs. Henderson murmured, scrolling through digital archives. Yes, here we go. Enlisted in 1951, served in Korea. She clicked another file. Oh my. Listed as missing in action in 53. Emily leaned closer to the screen. But what happened after that, Mrs. Henderson's fingers kept moving. Well, this is interesting. There are several town records mentioning him after his supposed disappearance. Small things, property tax payments, boat registration renewals. She looked at Emily with raised eyebrows. For someone missing in action, he left quite a paper trail. Can you print these for me? Of course, dear. Mrs. Henderson pressed a few keys. Let me check our newspaper archives too. Small towns love their gossip, even decades old. While the printer hummed, they scrolled through digitized copies of the local paper. Emily's heart jumped when a headline from 1960 caught her eye. Mystery boat found, local fisherman's vessel abandoned. That's it, Emily breathed. That has to be the same boat. The article described a fishing boat discovered far up on the shore, as if deliberately placed there. The owner was never found, but locals whispered about seeing James Holloway in town around that time. People said he came back different, Mrs. Henderson said softly, reading over Emily's shoulder. Some thought he couldn't face his family after whatever happened in Korea. Others said he had another family somewhere. She shook her head. Such a sad story. Emily's hands trembled as she gathered the printed papers. Were there any other records? Letters, documents, anything about where he might have gone? Mrs. Henderson typed again, her brow furrowed in concentration. Here's something odd. He kept paying property taxes on a small plot of land up the coast until 1975. After that, nothing. Could you print that too? Emily asked, her mind already racing with possibilities. While the printer worked, Mrs. Henderson studied Emily's face. You know, you look an awful lot like Mary Holloway, James's wife. Something about your eyes. Emily's heart skipped a beat, remembering the photo of the woman with the baby. Do you have any pictures of her? Better than that. Mrs. Henderson pulled out an old leather-bound volume. This is our town's centennial photo album from 1968. Mary Holloway helped organize. She flipped through the pages until she found what she was looking for. There. Emily stared at the black and white image. The woman in the photo was older than in the tin box picture, but those eyes, her eyes, stared back at her. Even the small scar above the eyebrow matched her own. Mrs. Henderson, Emily said slowly, how many children did James and Mary Holloway have? The librarian's fingers moved across the keyboard again. According to records, just 10 say their son Jack. She paused, looking at another entry. Though there was a birth certificate filed in 1953 for a baby girl, but it was marked deceased shortly after. Emily's hands clutched the edge of the desk. A baby girl. In 1953, the same year James disappeared. The same year as the letters in the tin box. Gathering the printed papers with shaking hands, Emily thanked Mrs. Henderson and walked toward the exit. Her mind whirled with questions. Why would someone file a false death certificate? What was James Holloway trying to protect, egg, or hide? As she pushed open the heavy library doors, the bright sunlight momentarily blinded her. When her vision cleared, she saw Jack Holloway standing at the bottom of the steps, arms crossed over his chest. His face was a storm cloud of emotions, and Emily knew her morning of discoveries was about to become even more complicated. Emily clutched her folder of documents to her chest, heart racing as she stared down at Jack Holloway. The morning sun cast harsh shadows across his weathered face, making him look even more intimidating than before. Following me now? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Jack uncrossed his arms, his shoulders dropping slightly. Had to know what you'd find. His voice was gruff but lacked the anger from their previous encounter. This isn't just your mystery anymore. Emily descended the library steps slowly, maintaining eye distance between them. Shadow lay at Jack's feet, alert but calmer than during their first meeting. I found some interesting things about your father. I figured you would. Jack ran a hand through his graying hair. That's why I'm here. Maybe we should compare notes. Emily studied his face, searching for signs of the hostility he'd shown before. Instead, she saw something different, uncertainty, and perhaps a hint of hope. There's more to investigate at the boat, she said carefully. Would you come with me? You might notice things I missed. Jack hesitated, then gave a short nod. My truck's over there. Shadow can ride in the back with your dog if you want to follow me out." 20 minutes later, they parked near the dunes. The morning fog had burned away, leaving the beach bright and empty. Ranger and Shadow bounded ahead, their earlier tension forgotten as they raced toward the water. The old boat looked different in full daylight, less mysterious but somehow more sad. Jack approached it slowly, his boots leaving deep prints in the sand. He reached out and touched the weathered hull, his fingers tracing patterns Emily hadn't noticed before. "Dad carved these," he said quietly. "Military symbols, unit numbers, coordinates from Korea. He'd sit out here for hours sometimes, just carving." Emily moved closer, examining the faded marks. "You used to come here with him? When I was very young, before he—" Jack's voice trailed off. He pointed to a series of numbers. "That was his unit. And here, these are coordinates from somewhere in Korea. Never knew why he marked them." The dog's excited barking drew their attention. Ranger and Shadow were scratching frantically at a section of the hull, different from where Emily had found the tin box. "They smell something," Emily said, moving closer. She knelt beside the dogs, running her hands over the weathered wood. "This plank feels different." Jack knelt beside her, his knees creaking. He rapped his knuckles against several spots. A hollow sound echoed from one section. "There's a space behind here." He pulled a multi-tool from his pocket, working the blade between the planks. "Dad was always building hidden compartments. Said he learned it in Korea, how to hide things in plain sight." The wood groaned as Jack worked the plank loose. Emily held her breath as a dark space appeared within the hull. Jack reached in carefully, his fingers finding something metal. "Here," he said, withdrawing his hand. In his palm lay a tarnished silver bracelet, its links dulled with age. Emily leaned closer, then felt the air leave her lungs. Engraved on a small plate were two words that made her world tilt: Margaret Carson. That's my mother's name," she whispered, her fingers trembling as she reached for the bracelet. The metal felt cool against her skin, decades of secrets contained in its simple links. Her knees weakened, and she sat heavily in the sand. Why would my mother's bracelet be hidden in your father's boat?" The discovery hung between them like a physical thing, connecting their separate mysteries into something larger and more complex than either had imagined. The dogs settled quietly beside them, as if sensing the weight of the moment, while the waves continued their eternal rhythm against the shore. The kitchen light cast a warm glow over Emily's worn oak table as she carefully arranged the items from both discoveries. The tarnished bracelet caught the light, its engraving still clearly visible, despite years of hiding. Michael sat at the far end, his math homework spread before him, occasionally glancing up with curiosity at the adults. Jack perched uncomfortably in a kitchen chair, his face ashen as he stared at the collection of memories laid bare. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for one of the photographs, then pulled back as if it might burn him. Ranger and Shadow dozed together in the corner, their earlier rivalry forgotten in the evening's heavy atmosphere. "I just don't understand," Emily said softly, picking up the bracelet. "My mother never talked about her life before I was born. It was like there was this wall around certain topics." She traced the engraved name with her thumb. "Margaret Carson. She wore this kind of bracelet in some old photos, but I always assumed she lost it during a move." Jack leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "When exactly was your mother born?" 1935, Emily replied. "She would have been in her early 20s when your father—" She let the sentence trail off, seeing Jack's jaw tighten. "During the Korean War," he finished stiffly, "when Dad was supposedly missing in action." Michael looked up from his homework, his pencil tapping thoughtfully against his textbook. "Mom, did you say Mr. Jack's dad was a soldier? Like in my history book?" Emily nodded, grateful for her son's innocent way of breaking tension. "Yes, honey, Mr. Jack's father served in Korea. Was he a hero?" Michael's eyes sparkled with interest. Jack's expression softened slightly at the boy's question. "That's what everyone told me growing up. But heroes don't usually—" He stopped, struggling with words that seemed to pain him. Emily reached for one of the letters, her movements gentle and deliberate. "These letters show a man who cared deeply about family, Jack." Whatever happened was wrong," Jack cut in, his voice rough. "My father he wouldn't have." His hands clenched into fists on the table. "The evidence suggests they knew each other." Emily pressed carefully. "Your father and my mother. The bracelet, the photos, the letters mentioning a daughter—" "No," Jack pushed back from the table, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Both dogs lifted their heads at the sudden noise. "My father was a good man. He wouldn't have abandoned one family for another." Michael watched the exchange with wide eyes. Mom? Is Mr. Jack mad because his dad knew Grandma? Margaret? It's complicated, sweetheart, Emily said, trying to keep her voice calm for her son's sake. But if his dad knew Grandma, doesn't that make Mr. Jack kind of like family? Michael's innocent logic cut through the tension like a knife. Like an uncle or something? Emily saw Jack flinch as if struck. The word family seemed to echo in the small kitchen, heavy with implications neither adult was ready to face. Listen to me, Jack said, his voice shaking with emotion. My father came home from Korea. He raised me. He was faithful to my mother until the day he disappeared. I won't believe anything else. He pushed himself up from the table, his movements jerky with suppressed anger. Jack, please. Emily stood as well. We need to figure this out together. These aren't just coincidences. No, Jack's shout made both dogs jump to their feet. I won't stand here and listen to accusations about my father living some kind of double life. He was a hero, not a he cut himself off, storming toward the door. Shadow scrambled to follow his master, nails clicking on the linoleum. The screen door slammed behind them, the sound sharp in the evening quiet. Emily sank back into her chair, her fingers finding the bracelet again. Michael moved to stand beside her, placing a small hand on her shoulder. Did I say something wrong, Mom? No, sweetie, she assured him, pulling him into a one-armed hug. Sometimes grown-ups just have trouble with difficult truths. Through the window, she could hear Jack's truck roaring to life, gravel crunching under its tires as he fled into the darkness. Emily lifted the bracelet to the light, studying its worn surface as if it might suddenly speak and explain everything. Mom, she whispered to the empty air, what did you hide from me? The only answer was the soft ticking of the kitchen clock and Ranger's quiet whine as he pressed against her leg, offering what comfort he could in the heavy silence that filled the room. Emily's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as she pulled into the Seaview Nursing Home's parking lot. The morning sun glinted off the building's whitewashed walls, making her squint. She'd barely slept after Jack's dramatic exit, spending hours studying the bracelet and rereading the letters until the words blurred together. A rumor from the library archives had led her here. The helpful librarian had mentioned that one of the retired nurses living at Seaview had worked at the military base hospital during the 1950s. It felt like a long shot, but Emily needed answers. The automatic doors whooshed open, releasing a wave of antiseptic-scented air. At the front desk, a young receptionist smiled brightly. Can I help you? I'm looking for Nurse Evelyn. I was told she used to work at the base hospital. Oh, Miss Evelyn, she's in the sunroom. She loves visitors. The receptionist pointed down a cheerful hallway decorated with watercolor paintings. Emily found the sunroom easily enough. Morning light streamed through large windows, warming several elderly residents who sat in comfortable chairs, some reading, others dozing. In the corner, a white-haired woman was carefully tending to a collection of African violets. Nurse Evelyn. Emily approached cautiously. The woman turned, revealing bright eyes and a face mapped with wrinkles. Just Evelyn these days, dear. Haven't been nurse for quite some time. She gestured to an empty chair. But you're not here about my flowers, are you? Emily sat, pulling out the tin box. No, ma'am. I'm hoping you might remember someone from when you worked at the base hospital. A soldier named James Holloway. Evelyn's hands stilled on the violet leaves. James Holloway, she repeated softly. My goodness. That's a name I haven't heard in years. She settled into her own chair, eyes distant with memory. Korean War veteran. Came in with shrapnel wounds in 1953. Emily's heart quickened. You remember him? Specifically? Oh yes, some patients stick with you. You see, James was different. Evelyn's fingers twisted in her lap. He healed well enough physically, but his mind seemed elsewhere. Always asking about someone, even when he was delirious with fever. Who was he asking about? A woman. He was desperate to find her. Evelyn's gaze sharpened, studying Emily's face. Said she'd had his child. He'd only learned about it after returning from Korea. Emily's hands trembled as she opened the tin box, removing the photo of the woman holding the baby. Was this her? Evelyn's breath caught. Margaret, she whispered. Yes, that's exactly how I remember her. She worked as a seamstress, mending uniforms at the base. Such a quiet thing, but her eyes, she looked up at Emily, just like yours, dear. The confirmation hit Emily like a physical blow. She was my mother. I thought as much. The resemblance is striking. Evelyn reached out, patting Emily's hand. James spoke of her constantly during his recovery. Said they'd fallen in love before he shipped out, but his letters never reached her. When he returned and found out about the baby about you, he was beside himself. But what happened? Why didn't he find her? Evelyn's expression grew troubled. He tried. Lord, how he tried. But Margaret had moved away by then. No one knew where. She sighed heavily. James checked himself out of the hospital before he was fully healed. Said he had to keep searching. Did he? Emily's voice cracked. Find her, I mean? No, dear. At least, not that I know of. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. About a week later, there were reports of a small fishing boat caught in a storm. They found it washed up on shore, but James, she shook her head. Most believed he drowned trying to reach the next town up the coast, where someone claimed to have seen Margaret. Emily sat back, stunned. The pieces were falling into place, the abandoned boat, the hidden letters, her mother's bloat, lifelong silence about her father. She never told me, she whispered. She took the secret to her grave. Different times, dear. Unwed mothers face terrible stigma. And if she thought James had died searching for her. Evelyn's voice trailed off. Sometimes people bury their pain so deep, they convince themselves it's better left undisturbed. Emily gathered the photos and letters with trembling fingers. Thank you, she managed. You've helped more than you know. Wait. Evelyn caught her wrist. There's something else you should know. James had a wife before Korea. A son, too. He told me the guilt was eating him alive, loving 2 women, having 2 families. He wanted to make it right somehow, but... She spread her hands helplessly. The sea had other plans. Emily nodded, unable to speak. She made her way back through the cheerful hallway, past the smiling receptionist, and out to her car. The morning had grown overcast, matching her turbulent thoughts. She sat in the driver's seat, letting tears fall freely. Her mother had carried this weight alone for decades, the love, the loss, the silence. And James, trying desperately to bridge 2 worlds, had paid with his life. Her phone buzzed, startling her. Jack's name appeared on the screen. She answered with shaking hands. Emily. His voice was raw, as if he'd been up all night too. We need to finish this. Meet me at the boat tomorrow morning, Jack, please. I've found something else. We have to know the truth. All of it. Okay. She whispered. Tomorrow morning. She ended the call and stared through her windshield at the nursing home, where Evelyn was probably still tending her violets, carrying memories of a desperate man who'd loved too much and lost everything trying to make it right. The drive home stretched before her, heavy with revelations that would forever change 2 families or perhaps reveal they had been one family all along. The rising sun painted the beach in shades of amber and rose, casting long shadows across the weathered hull of the old fishing boat. Emily pulled her jacket tighter against the morning chill as she watched Jack's truck rumble to a stop nearby. The 2 German shepherds, Ranger and Shadow, bounded ahead through the sand, their breath visible in the crisp air. You made it, Emily said softly as Jack approached, his face drawn with exhaustion. Didn't sleep much anyway. He gestured toward the boat. Been thinking about this place all night. About him. They stood in silence for a moment, watching their dogs circle the vessel, sniffing intently. Ranger's behavior suddenly changed, his casual investigation becoming focused, deliberate. He started digging frantically in the sand beneath the boat's stern, throwing up plumes of wet sand with his powerful paws. Ranger, what is it? Emily called out, but the dog only whined and dug more intensely. Shadow joined in, both dogs working in tandem, their determination evident in every movement. Jack knelt beside them, brushing sand away with his hands. There's something here. The sand's different, darker, like it was disturbed long ago. Emily joined him, her heart pounding as their fingers worked through the cold, wet sand. The dog's claws scraped against something solid, producing a hollow, metallic sound. Wait, Jack breathed, reaching deeper into the hole. I feel something. Together, they cleared away more sand, revealing the corner of a rusted metal box, wedged firmly into the packed earth. It took both of them, pulling in unison, to work it free from its decades-old resting place. The lockbox was roughly the size of a shoebox, its surface pitted and corroded by years of salt air and moisture. Despite the damage, a military insignia was still visible on its lid. Standard-issue military footlocker, Jack said hoarsely. Small one, for personal effects. Emily touched the box gently, almost reverently. Can we open it? Jack produced a multi-tool from his pocket, working carefully at the rusted latch. It finally gave way with a sharp crack, and they both held their breath as he lifted the lid. Inside, protected by what appeared to be an old oilskin wrap, lay a bundle of papers, more letters, their edges yellowed but the paper still intact. And beneath them, glinting dully in the early morning light, a set of dog tags. Jack's hand shook as he lifted them out. These were his. My father's tags. Emily carefully removed the letters while Jack stared at the metal tags, running his thumb over the embossed information. The first letter was dated just days before James Holloway was last seen alive. Should I? She hesitated, looking at Jack. He nodded, his throat working. Read it, please. Emily unfolded the brittle paper carefully, her voice quiet but clear in the still morning air. My dearest Margaret, if you're reading this, then I've failed in my final attempt to make things right. The guilt of loving two women, of having two families, has torn me apart these past years. But I cannot, will not, deny either love. You gave me Emily, a daughter I've only seen in photographs but love with all my heart. My son Jack bears my name, and my first wife's spirit. Both of you deserve better than my silence, my absence. I've finally found you, Margaret. You're in Millbrook, just up the coast. Tomorrow night, I'm taking the boat up to find you, to tell you everything. Then I'll return for Jack and Sarah, and somehow, God willing, we'll find a way to be one family. It's time for the truth, all of it, if I don't make it. Tell Emily, I never stopped searching for her. Tell Jack I never abandoned him, he was in my thoughts every day. And forgive me, all of you, for not being brave enough sooner. With all my love, James. Emily's voice broke on the final words. She pulled out another letter, this one addressed to Jack and his mother, containing similar sentiments, love, regret, and a desperate hope for reconciliation. Jack had sunk to his knees in the sand, the dog tags clutched in his fist. All this time, he whispered, his voice raw with emotion, all this time, he never abandoned us. Emily knelt beside him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. Ranger and Shadow pressed close on either side, offering silent comfort as the sun climbed higher over the water. The truth had finally surfaced after decades buried in the sand, not a story of abandonment but one of a man torn between loves, trying to bridge two worlds. James Holloway had died trying to reunite his families, leaving behind these final testaments of his love and regret. He loved us, Jack said, his voice stronger now. Both families, he was trying to bring us together. Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. He never stopped trying to find us, to make it right. They sat there as the morning grew brighter, two strangers connected by a father's love and sacrifice. While their dogs stood guard over the long-buried secrets finally brought into the light, the waves lapped gently at the shore, and somewhere in the distance, a seabird called. Jack opened his palm, the dog tags catching the sunlight. All this time, he whispered again, he never abandoned us. Emily and Jack remained on the beach as the morning tide crept higher, the gentle waves providing a soothing rhythm to their emotional discoveries. The lockbox lay open between them, its remaining contents spread carefully on Jack's weathered jacket to protect them from the sand. There's more, Emily said softly, pulling out another letter. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded it. The paper was delicate, worn at the creases, but the writing remained clear, a father's last words to the daughter he never knew. Jack nodded, his eyes red-rimmed but steady. Go ahead. Emily's voice wavered as she began reading. My dearest Emily, you won't remember me. How could you? But I've carried your picture in my wallet since the day your mother sent it to me in Korea. You have my mother's eyes. Did you know that? The same clear blue that could see right through to a person's soul. I wonder what kind of young woman you've become. Do you love the ocean like I do? Does the sight of seabirds wheeling against the sky fill you with the same peace I've always found there? I've made so many mistakes, Emily. The worst was letting fear keep me from claiming you as my daughter. Your mother, Margaret, she was so young when we met, and I was already married with a son. The war changed me, made me believe I could keep two separate lives, two separate loves. But secrets have a way of poisoning everything they touch. I'm trying to make it right now. Too late, perhaps, but I have to try. You deserve to know your brother, Jack. He's a good boy, nearly a man now, with a heart as big as the ocean, though he tries to hide it. You two should know each other. Family should be together. All my love, your father. James. Emily had to stop, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. Jack reached over, taking the letter gently from her hands. He kept your picture, Jack said hoarsely. I found it once, in his wallet, but he wouldn't tell me who you were, just said it was someone precious to him. He swallowed hard. I was so angry with him for so long, I thought he just walked away from us. Emily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. All this time, I never knew. Mom never spoke about him. She'd get this sad look whenever I asked about my father, and eventually, I just stopped asking. The waves crept closer as they read through the remaining letters together. Each one revealed more pieces of their shared history. James writing to both families, trying to find a way to bring them together, struggling with his conscience and his heart. He was my father, Emily said wonderingly. And you're my brother. The words felt strange on her tongue, but right somehow, like a puzzle piece finally clicking into place. Jack stared out at the ocean, his father's dog tag still clutched in one hand. Half-brother, he corrected, then shook his head. No, just brother, he wanted us to be family. No halves about it. Emily noticed how the morning light caught the tears tracking down his weathered cheeks. This proud, defensive man who had stormed into her life demanding answers was now her brother. The thought filled her with a bittersweet mix of joy and grief. Joy at finding family she never knew she had. Grief for all the years they'd lost. We have to tell the real story, she said firmly, not just for us, but for him. People should know who James Holloway really was, not a deserter or a man who abandoned his family, but someone who tried to do right by everyone he loved, even if he made mistakes along the way. Jack nodded slowly. He deserves that much. And more. He looked at Emily, really looked at her, seeing their father's features in her face. We'll tell Michael everything. He should know about his grandfather. As if summoned by his name, they heard the boy's excited voice carrying across the beach. Mom, Uncle Jack, look. They turned to see Michael running toward them, his sneakers kicking up sand, something clutched in his hands. Ranger and Shadow, who had been lying quietly nearby, perked up at his approach. Michael skidded to a stop in front of them, slightly out of breath but beaming. In his hands, he held a piece of driftwood, weathered smooth by the sea. It was naturally shaped like a cross, its proportions almost too perfect to be random. Can we put it by the boat? Michael asked, his eyes bright with purpose. Like a marker, so we don't forget. Emily and Jack exchanged glances, both struck by the simple wisdom of children. Michael had already accepted Jack as family, had been calling him Uncle Jack since their first meeting, as if he'd known something the adults were only now discovering. That's perfect, buddy, Jack said, his voice rough with emotion. He helped Michael place the driftwood cross in the sand near the bow of the old boat, pressing it deep so it would stand straight and true. The three of them stood there, an unlikely family brought together by long-buried secrets and a father's enduring love. The morning sun caught the salt spray in the air, creating a momentary rainbow, a bridge of light across the water. As if James Holloway himself were offering one final blessing to his united family. The morning dawned clear and bright, 1 week after their discovery of James Holloway's final letters. Emily stood on her porch, watching Jack's truck pull up with wooden planks and cleaning supplies in the bed. The old fishing boat was about to get a new lease on life, not as a vessel for the sea, but as a memorial to a man who had loved two families. Ready for this? Jack called out as he climbed down from the cab. His voice was lighter these days, the weight of decades of misunderstanding finally lifted from his shoulders. As ready as I'll ever be, Emily replied, stepping down to help unload. Michael burst out of the house behind her, practically vibrating with excitement. Can I help paint, Mom? Please? He begged, already reaching for a brush. Emily laughed. Of course, sweetie. This is your grandfather's boat. You should definitely help restore it. They drove down to the beach where the boat had rested for so many years. Word had spread through their small coastal town about James Holloway's story, and people were already gathering. Some brought flowers, others carried small American flags. A group of veterans, some who had served in Korea themselves, stood solemnly near the water's edge. Ranger and Shadow raced across the sand, playing together like old friends. Emily watched them with a smile, remembering how they had helped uncover the truth buried in the sand. The dogs had known, somehow, that there were secrets to be found. Emily dear. A familiar voice called out. Nurse Evelyn was making her way carefully across the sand, supported by her daughter. Despite her age, her eyes were bright with purpose. I wouldn't have missed this for the world. Emily hurried to help her to a comfortable chair they'd set up in the shade. Thank you for coming, Evelyn. Your story about Dad, about James, it helped us understand so much. That man loved both his families fiercely, Evelyn said, patting Emily's hand. I'm just glad the truth is finally known. The work began in earnest. Local teenagers pitched in to help sand down the weathered boards. Jack directed the restoration efforts, his experience with boats proving invaluable. Emily worked alongside him, and slowly, the siblings began to share memories. "I remember him teaching me to tie sailors' knots," Jack said, demonstrating one as he secured a fresh plank. "He had endless patience, would show me again and again until I got it right." Emily absorbed these stories hungrily, building a picture of the father she'd never known. "Mom used to hum this old sea shanty sometimes," she offered. "I wonder now if it was something he taught her." Michael darted between the workers, proudly telling anyone who would listen about his grandfather. "He was a hero in the Korean War," he'd say, chest puffed out. "And he loved his family so much he tried to bring everyone together." The veterans had brought a proper flag and mounted it near the boat. One of them, a man with silver hair and sharp eyes, approached Jack and Emily. "Your father served with honor," he said solemnly. "This is a fitting tribute." Throughout the day, more people arrived. Someone brought sandwiches and cold drinks. Others shared stories they'd heard about James Holloway, the quiet fisherman who'd returned from war changed but not broken. The pieces of his life came together through their collective memories. A local carpenter helped them attach a simple brass plaque to the boat's hull: "James Holloway, soldier, father, fisherman. Love knows no boundaries." Nurse Evelyn nodded in approval when she read it, wiping tears from her eyes. "Perfect," she whispered. "Honestly, just perfect." By late afternoon, the transformation was complete. The old boat gleamed with fresh paint and varnish, its wood restored to a warm honey color. Flowers decorated the bow, and small flags fluttered in the sea breeze. The driftwood cross Michael had found still stood sentinel nearby, now surrounded by more flowers and mementos left by townspeople. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, people gradually departed, leaving with handshakes and warm words. Michael had fallen asleep in a beach chair, exhausted from his day of helping and storytelling. Ranger and Shadow lay nearby, keeping watch over him. Emily and Jack stood side by side, watching the setting sun paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The light caught the restored boat, making it glow like gold, a beacon of truth and reconciliation. "Dad would have loved this," Jack said softly. "All these people coming together, honoring his memory. And his family together at last," Emily added, slipping her hand into her brother's. "Both parts of his heart finally whole." The waves lapped gently at the shore, their rhythm unchanged since the days when James Holloway had sailed these waters. The restored boat stood proud against the darkening sky, no longer a forgotten mystery, but a testament to love's endurance across time and tragedy. Shadow padded over and pressed against Jack's legs, while Ranger came to Emily's side. The dogs had brought them to this truth, and now they stood guard over this newfound family, united at last under the golden light of sunset. Michael stirred in his chair, blinking sleepily. "Is it over?" he asked. "The celebration is," Emily said, smiling at her son. "But our story? I think it's just beginning." The boat glowed in the last rays of sunlight, its restored wood warming to amber and gold. It would stand as a reminder not just of James Holloway, but of the power of truth to heal old wounds and unite what was once broken. The sea breeze carried the scent of salt and flowers, and in that moment, it felt as if James himself was there, finally at peace knowing his family was whole at last. The evening sea breeze carried the scent of salt and wood smoke as flames danced against the darkening sky. Emily sat back in her beach chair, watching Michael expertly rotate his marshmallow over the bonfire. His face glowed with concentration and pure joy, a sight that made her heart swell. Jack sat across from them, his features softened by the firelight. Shadow and Ranger lay side by side near the warmth, their earlier rivalry forgotten in the peace of the moment. The restored boat stood as a silent guardian behind them, its newly cleaned surface reflecting the occasional spark from the fire. "You're going to burn it if you hold it there too long," Jack advised Michael, leaning forward with a grin. "Here's a trick my dad, your grandpa, taught me. Hold it just above the flames, not right in them." Michael adjusted his stick accordingly, beaming when the marshmallow turned a perfect golden brown. "Thanks, Uncle Jack. Want half?" "You earned that one, buddy. All yours." Emily watched the easy interaction between them, marveling at how naturally Jack had stepped into the role of uncle. Just weeks ago, he'd been the angry stranger on her doorstep, demanding answers about a tin box full of secrets. Now, he was family in every sense of the word. "I still can't believe how all this started," Emily said softly, gesturing toward the boat. "One morning walk with Ranger, and suddenly everything I thought I knew about my family changed." Jack nodded, tossing a small piece of driftwood into the fire. "Life's funny that way. I spent years being angry at Dad, convinced he just walked away from us. All that time, the truth was literally buried in the sand, waiting for your dog to find it. Ranger's ears perked up at the mention of his role, and Emily reached down to scratch his head. "Good boy," she murmured. "You knew there was something important there, didn't you?" "Both dogs did," Jack added. "Shadow wouldn't leave that spot alone either. Must be something in their blood, like they knew they were guarding a family secret." Michael, having finished his marshmallow, settled into the sand between the two dogs. "Mom says Ranger and Shadow are like cousins now, just like we're all family." The simple truth of a child's perspective made both adults smile. Emily watched as her son absently stroked both dogs, completely at ease in this expanded family circle that had seemed impossible just weeks ago. "Speaking of family," Jack said, clearing his throat, "I've been thinking. That college fund you've been worried about for Michael, I want to help. The garage is doing well, and I've got no one else to spend it on." Emily started to protest, but Jack held up his hand. "Let me finish. Dad would have wanted this. He tried so hard to take care of both his families. Let me do what he couldn't." Tears pricked at Emily's eyes. "Jack? That's incredibly generous." "It's what brothers do," he said simply. "Besides, the kid's got Dad's brains. He'll need that college fund." The fire crackled, sending sparks spinning up toward the stars. Emily thought about how this beach had become sacred ground for their family. First as the hiding place of their father's secrets, and now as the spot where healing truly began. "You know what makes me happiest?" Michael piped up, breaking the thoughtful silence. "That Grandpa James wasn't a bad person like Uncle Jack first thought. He was trying to make everything right." Jack's expression softened further. "Out of the mouths of babes," he muttered, then louder, "You're right, kiddo. I spent too many years being angry when I should have been proud." The tide began creeping closer, its gentle rhythm a soothing backdrop to their conversation. Emily watched as other families strolled along the beach in the twilight, some pausing to admire the restored boat. Children darted around its hull, playing hide and seek in the long evening shadows. "The museum curator said the display will be ready next week," Emily mentioned. "They're making a beautiful case for Dad's letters and dog tags. The tin box too, though it's hard to believe something so simple held such important secrets." "Did you see the plaque they're making?" Jack asked. "It tells the whole story, about Dad's service in Korea, his two families, his attempt to bring everyone together. They're calling it a legacy of love, the James Holloway story." Michael sat up straighter. "Can I go see it when it's done? I want to show my friends at school." "Of course you can, sweetheart," Emily assured him. "That's exactly what your grandfather would have wanted, for his story to live on through you." The fire had burned lower now, casting a warm glow over their small circle. Emily looked at her son, her newly found brother, and their faithful dogs, this unexpected family brought together by an old boat and buried secrets. She thought about her father, imagining him watching over them with pride. Quietly, so quietly the words nearly merged with the sound of the waves, Emily whispered, "Dad, your story lives on now." The tide continued its eternal dance with the shore, lapping gently at the sand. Behind them, the restored boat stood proud against the darkening sky, no longer a forgotten mystery but a testament to love, sacrifice, and the power of truth to heal even the deepest wounds. In the museum across town, a glass case waited to preserve the physical remnants of James Holloway's story, the tin box that started it all, the letters that revealed his heart, and the dog tags that proved his service to both country and family. But the real legacy lived on in the people gathered around this beach bonfire, in Michael's innocent wisdom, in Jack's transformed heart, and in Emily's newfound sense of belonging. Together, they had turned a morning discovery into an evening of peace, proving that even the most deeply buried secrets could lead to healing when brought into the light of truth and love. If even one moment stayed with you, hit subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story written gently for the heart.